Starmer out by June 30 just printed 64 cents. Yesterday morning, it was 32. You'd want to see the bloc actually clear 61 seats in polling, or Bennett reverse his Arab Party position before this becomes a real trade.
Neither happened today.
Taiwan invasion by year-end moved from 6 cents to 7.
That podcast you just heard was 100% AI. I created an agent that looks at data from Polymarket to look at the most interesting markets every single day, track their 24-hour price movements, track the volume that's most relevant, map news alerts from the internet that are most relevant to those markets, and give them a relevancy score every single day that then gets synthesized by an LLM into a script read by two podcasters that are processed by Gemini text-to-speech. I'm going to show you exactly how I built this and how you can build a data pipeline of your own that then creates a personalized media set for you for whatever you care about every single day. So this is my own dashboard that I built, and this is my pipeline that goes from Polymarket data to ready-made podcast, as you just heard, every single day. And I have this running once every 12 hours, so I get data every 12 hours, and then it gets synthesized into a podcast once every 24 hours, and it sends me a podcast to my Telegram every morning at 5 a.m., so it's ready for when I wake up. So you can do the same thing for really any kind of data that you care about, really any kind of news that you care about. And if you care about specific markets on Polymarket or on Kalshi or really any other kind of prediction market or 24/7 market, whether that's Hyperliquid or Binance or really anything that you want to track, equities or otherwise, you can plug that into this exact system and build this for yourself. So my pipeline looks like this. So I get the raw data. It tracks 201 total markets every single day, and the way that's filtered is by volume. So I want to only look at the top 200 markets by volume. These were the 10 selected as stories that are interesting because of the price change, the volume, the news that was mapped to it, and then all of that combines into a relevancy score that my LLM ranks. So the stories that were most interesting yesterday were Bennett to become the Prime Minister of Israel, China to invade Taiwan, Ethereum to dip to 1,500, Starmer to be out by the end of June, another couple Bitcoin markets, Brazilian election, Chinese politics, Starmer, and Israel to win Eurovision. So then it tracks the upcoming resolutions in the next 24 hours, and it sorts them by volume as well. And these are markets that are going to end, and they're going to have to be resolved either yes or no. So these could be interesting. Many of them are junk, and so our LLM will filter those out. So this is the first step of the process, just taking raw data from Polymarket and from Kalshi. The second part of this, I'll show you the code, how I actually built this, and you'll be able to build this yourself. So the editorial review. So then what happens is we take all of that raw data, we take the 10 top stories that are given, the highest score, and then we pass them to an LLM to then sort them. So these are all really just different agents that are getting different pieces of context, and they're going to make different decisions based on what they decide is the next best step. So here we see very briefly, the episode is dominated by the Starmer leadership collapse, 2 segments, June and December contracts, anchored by cabinet defections and prior coverage accountability, while supporting geopolitical and crypto spread stories fill out the back half. So the story decisions, this tells me exactly what this agent decided to do. So this is my editorial agent, right? I have, if we go through here, we have 2B, nothing interesting on the resolutions coming up. We have the research layer here. We have the next the prompt sent to the LLM. So these are defined. I've defined these previously, and these both get passed to the LLM to create the actual scripts. So then I have my scriptwriter agent as step number 4. I have my auditor agent as step 4B. I have my production agent as step number 5, and then distribution agent as step number 6. So just to show the exact flow and the pipeline for actually building this out. But let's go back and let's go through the editorial agent. So what this is going to do is it's going to take all of these stories, and then it's going to actually reason out, why did we select this, right? What is relevant? Why did this market jump or drop, and why was there a spike in volume? So we have a bunch of logic in this section here to think about what are the things that might be relevant, what things stick out versus the other things, because there are thousands of markets on Polymarket and Kalshi. We want to filter out the things that aren't that interesting, and so things that were interesting yesterday were these things here. So and you can see in previous episodes that it's not always the same. You'll see different stuff every day. So the Iranian regime, Starmer, Fed decreasing rates. We can see U.S.-Iran nuclear deal, Alphabet being the biggest company, Spencer Pratt in the mayoral election, Arsenal win the Premier League. So you can see every single day is a little bit different. Sometimes, of course, there's some overlap. Trump out as president, MicroStrategy, U.S. invade Iran, Ukraine peace deal. And these are not all the ones that will actually be selected as the most interesting stories for the day, right? And, you see the right here, the editorial review. Today's episode is anchored by the MicroStrategy accountability arc. So every day is a little different. You'll see different topics. Sometimes there are sports-related topics. Sometimes there are mayoral topics. Sometimes it's crypto-related. The U.S. confirms aliens. So we're getting different kinds of stories. We're getting different kinds of analyses every single day. The editorial agent then decides, okay, is this stuff actually relevant or is this not relevant? Here we see, okay, sibling market to the lead story with prior coverage at 49 cents, now at 85 cents. So it actually looks back at previous episodes as well. It gets past that data from the last few episodes, and then it decides, okay, what should I do next? So then here we go. We rank each of these. Should I keep or should I not keep? Priority 1, priority 2, how deep do we want to go on each of these, and then that will decide how long we go in the script on each one of these, right? So here we go. Thin book, 33K, 4-point intraday move is noise, no AB tier, the Bitcoin 100K story is adequately covered. So it gives you the reasoning for why these are included or not included, right? So resolution coverage, no resolutions in the next 24 hours, okay. Here's the research layer. Now, here's what we're doing, right? 28 web search. So web search, this means that it's using Claude web search, okay? The URLs, I previously built a system that was pulling from Gemini, and it was getting URLs just from Google, and then I was scraping those, and I was reading those, and I was seeing what was relevant. But Claude has its own web search tool that's pretty good. And so you can see how old each of these things are. It's supposed to then look at what's the most relevant for this specific market. So it's not just, okay, like let's look at this news, but it's how does that map to this specific market? And how that maps to this specific market is that, will Naftali Bennett be the next prime minister of Israel? In the last 24 hours, that person's odds are minus 24% on $41,000 of volume. So we have some basis to say, okay, that might be a real thing. And then we can start looking at, okay, in the last, 15 minutes ago, this happened. In the last, 8 hours ago, this happened. Okay, in the last, 10 hours ago, this happened. So we can start then piecing together, okay, why might this have happened? And then this is where the LLM comes in and actually starts reasoning out, in this case, it might have reasoned that this was not the most relevant story, right? We see that it's not number one. We see that it's actually, it's, where is it? It's not even number two. Yeah, we don't know where it is. Bennett right here. So it's number three. It's the third most relevant story. So the LLM reasoned out that, okay, even though this thing technically got the highest score, based on the news that actually came out, it might not be the thing that we want to lead with. We might want to lead with this guy right here, Starmer. So this is the second part, right? This is the second agent, the editorial agent. The research is basically just to add to that. And then here we go. We have the prompts that are actually sent to the LLM. You're a script writer for Market Signals, a daily prediction market podcast. This is the audience. These are the hosts. This is all stuff you can customize. And I'll share all of this with you guys in the link below. I'll create like a GitHub repo that you can link or you can access, and then you can customize this however you want to. So here we go. Then here are the generated scripts. Okay, so this is our script writer agent host. Starmer out by June 30th, just printed 64 cents. Yesterday morning it was 32. That's not the local election losses repricing. Those were already in the market. What happened overnight is cabinets. Home Secretary Mahmoud privately lobbying for an orderly transition. Yada, yada, yada. Okay? So then it's going, okay, Bennett in Israel, Taiwan invasion risk, Eurovision's volume spike are also on the slate today. Okay, so these are the things that are happening today. And then it goes through between the host and the analyst. Okay, Boris Johnson parallel is worth naming explicitly. It will go through and it will track each market that's relevant to the news that we mapped, and then it will talk about exactly what's happening there, what's relevant to you in a way that's, digestible in podcast format. In the podcast, you don't necessarily have to have it be a podcast. If you like reading your news, this can just be a newsletter that's personalized, customized, sent to you every single day, right? It can be in any format you want. If you want David Letterman to be the guy that writes your newsletter, you can say, write me, a newsletter on all the markets that I care about in the style of David Letterman, and it will do that. So the next thing is the auditor agent, right? So we don't want to just send over one script, say, okay, this is the final script. We want to then have some additional skills that are past the script that we wrote, and then have it actually audit that for fabrications, for, just any hallucinations and errors, or just ways that we can make this better. So here we go. We have a scoring system of how to look at this stuff. So severity, the category, the actual quote, the issue, and then what is the expected, what should be written instead. All right, so here we see severity high, fabricated number, December contract, we covered it at 49 cents on May 9th and called it too high. Script claims the prior coverage called 35 cents more defensible, but the editor steers says the prior call was 30 to 35 cents for contract covered at 49. However, the canonical facts show the December contract 7 days ago was 69 cents, not 49 cents. So we basically made an error in that script because the LLM hallucinated something. So we don't want that. So we can't have these kinds of things. So a fabricated number is the highest level severity, right? Then there are other levels of severity, like an unsupported claim. If we start saying stuff that doesn't have actual backing, we don't want that. So these are the errors here. And then what it does is then it will pass these errors back, and then it will generate a new script. And then what will happen is we'll see the output here.
Starmer out by June 30 just printed 64 cents. Yesterday morning it was 32.
There we go. Okay, so we can see, a whole 8-minute script is here.
You'd want to see the block actually clear 61 seats in polling, or Bennett reverse his Arab Party position before this becomes a real trade.
Neither happened today.
Taiwan invasion by year end moved from 6 cents to 7 over.
All right, nice. So we have a full podcast ready now. This is the production agent. What this guy does is he actually sends the script, the final script, to Google text to speech. It's going to receive the raw MP3 file back. It's going to concatenate it with our intro music and outro music. I haven't added that here just for simplicity, but you can add any kind of intro and outro you want. The other thing it does is for short clips, you don't want just one podcast. You want it to be broken down into bite-sized little elements, and you want to have those short clips that can go viral, and you can post them across Instagram and TikTok and YouTube Shorts. So the other thing it does is in the scriptwriter agent, it tells the scriptwriter basically enforces that the first 60 seconds, however many words that is probably be close to 200 words, that will be a standalone segment, and so it will actually demarcate that out. It won't say it clearly here, but it will say it in the actual code. And then what that does is then when you create the output of the MP3, you're going to have an MP3, a short MP3, that you can just upload separately as a YouTube or a TikTok or an Instagram. So what it's actually doing is it's taking that raw data and it's converting it to an MP4 so that I can upload it as a video file to those video platforms, because video generally does better. But that's just something that we created. And so here it tells you, okay, here's the cold open, and then this is the final last 30 to 50 seconds, which is what to watch for in the next few hours. And these are all of our raw artifacts. So I can download them. I can see the scripts. I can see the first script and the V1 script. I can see all the resolved markets. And so these are all of our raw artifacts. So this is what the pipeline looks like. And now we can get into what the actual code looks like. All right, we are here in Cursor, and I want to start with the plan.md. So here we can go into what our actual architecture looks like. We have two independent systems. This system first started as a trading bot for prediction markets, right? So we ingest data via the Polymarket Gamma REST API every 6 hours. We look at the top 200 markets by 24-hour volume. Then we have the Polymarket Central Limit Order Book. That's what CLOB stands for. We want to look at the 24-hour and 7-day price history for each cash market. And then finally, we have a news to market matcher, which is going to take in news from certain news sources that we input, which is Telegram channels, Twitter feeds that we know give really fast news. And then it's going to match them to those markets that we cached and that we're going to be tracking, right? So it's going to say, okay, this piece of news just came in. Let me track that to a market that I saved that's on Polymarket that's live right now, or on Kalshi that's live right now. Okay, so then we pass that data, or we use that same data architecture for our podcast worker, right? So the podcast worker, then what it does is we collect podcast data. So then what it does is it reads the cash top markets and their price history. It looks at the news matches to those markets, and then it merges by market ID. So it looks at what markets might be relevant, what markets might be touching each other, their sister markets as they're called in the prediction market space, and then we match them together. We unify them and we look at, okay, what is actually relevant with each other. We give each of those a score based on the movement in the past 24 hours, how much it's changing up and down, what news relevance is actually being seen, like what is actually relevant enough to move that market, right? We don't want to just see some kind of noise on the prediction market where some big players just manipulating price and we get that noise. We don't want to incorporate that into our podcast. Then we look at the volume, right? Volume is important to a certain extent where it shows signal as to what people care about, right? And then we are looking at the research pipeline, right? We use Brave and Gemini for URLs. We have then actually incorporated Claude web search. I mentioned that earlier. We use Claude for our scripting, and then we use Gemini for our text-to-speech. So then the production pipeline basically ends here. We add an intro and outro sound, which you can customize as you want. And then we've built our own RSS feed and YouTube channels that we can actually publish this to. So now what happens here is it runs on its own every single day. There's really no touching this required. It's now, in fact, going to be published to Spotify, to YouTube pretty soon. So we'll see how people like these kinds of podcasts. But really, there are kind of three main data sources here: the Gamma API, the Central Limit Order Book Time Series, and then the REST API, which I mentioned earlier. So these are all the workers that we build: the Use Matcher worker, the Top Markets worker, the Story Builder, and then all the agents that we have that I showed earlier, which are represented here. So I may do another video if there's interest on how to actually build this from the ground up. Maybe show a full tutorial on how to connect to the Polymarket API. The Kalshi API, that's a little bit trickier, but I can still get into that. So if there's interest in that, if you want to see that, just comment below, and I can put that together as well. Thanks for joining.